The Car Dealer podcast is sponsored by Autotrader. John, have you ever wondered why I, along with 14,000 other dealers, choose to partner with Autotrader?
Well, actually,
I didn't think so. I'll tell you anyway. With more than 84 million consumer visits every month, it connects us with more engaged car buyers and delivers more deals than anyone else in the UK. And now, with the launch of Buying Signals, we'll have brand new insights on every deal, showing how likely a customer is to buy the car they're interested in. Plus, as someone who set out to use AI and data as much as possible in my business, I've found their technology, data and tools genuinely invaluable. But when I do get stuck,
which is, let's face it, most of the time,
Autotrader is always on hand and committed to supporting us to get the very best from our package. To find out how they can help you, visit trade.autotrader.co.uk.
Welcome back to the Car Dealer podcast, where we pick our favourite stories of the week and ask an industry guest to choose which were the best. I'm John Ray, and joining me this week is the incomparable Mr. James Batchelor. Batch, lovely to see you. It's been a while.
You know what? I think in all the years I've been doing the podcast, that is the nicest intro that you have ever given me. There's usually some, offhand remark about caravans or, Quentin Wilson, God rest his soul, impersonator. But no, thank you very much, John. Delighted to be here, which, as we know, I'm purely here because James Baggett isn't.
Yes, James is off on one of his typical low-budget holidays in the Alps. So, unfortunately, Batch, you've had to be risen from your slumber at this ungodly hour of 9 a.m. to record this. But I'm very pleased you're here. How are you? How have things been?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, what a start to the year. I was hoping for a bit of a relaxed couple of weeks at the start of 2026, and it just has not been the case. There's been so much news to do. There's been so many new cars to drive, so much going on. And I know that's a good thing, but I'm a bit tired already.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. I sort of, I still feel like, it feels like New Year was about 9 weeks ago, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Yes.
Yes. Busy here. James and I are gearing up for our NADA trip next month, which, of course, if anyone would like to come and join us, you're very welcome to. You can buy tickets to come to NADA on the Car Dealer website, including an enormous package of flights and hotels, etc., because I suspect that's going to be a very interesting conference. It's my first one, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Have you ever...
Shall I stop?
Well, no, I was going to say, have you ever been to Las Vegas before?
No.
Oh, wow. What an experience.
No, but I'm going with, it's a slightly strange trip to go there with James, who doesn't drink.
Well.
And
yeah. Well, it's not just the drinking.
What happens in Vegas will probably be lots of filing copy back to cars.
Well, it's not just the drinking, of course, it's the gambling as well, but that's an entirely different subject, isn't it? So.
Well, our guest this week is, I'm thrilled to say, Head of Regional Sales at Geely UK, Harry Bathe. Harry, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem at all, gentlemen. Lovely to be here on this fine Friday morning. Thank you for the invite.
Such a fine morning indeed. I mean, it stopped raining briefly, so that's a good start. So, Harry, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you end up in the car industry? Obviously, we'll come on to Geely in a moment, but I think you've got quite a wide-ranging background in the motor trade, haven't you?
I have, yes. I think I ended up in it like a lot of people did. I've got a love for cars, making money, and all that good stuff. So, started off as a salesman, or trainee salesman, should I say? It's a local Ford dealer in Oxford, where I'm from, and really sort of loved it. Fell in love with the trade. Selling cars. I was predominantly on used cars, and worked my way up to sort of business manager, general sales manager, and ran a Honda site and then a Volvo site over the course of a 25-year career, and then just got to the point, I've got young children, weekends, things like that, and I thought, I really want to change, really want to work for the OEM. I love the idea of being on the other side of it. Know plenty about the industry, obviously, in the wider world when it comes to manufacturers, but never actually worked for one. So, I looked around and sort of, you can't not notice the Chinese entrance at the minute, can you? They're everywhere, and the trajectory is quite impressive. So, here I am at Geely as head of regional sales. So we're a growing team. I was one of the first 5 employees in our Milton Keynes office back in March the 10th last year was our grand opening of the office. So turned up, didn't quite know what was going on, what to do. There wasn't a huge amount of people around, as you can imagine. Sort of sat down, laptop, mobile phone, go, right, here we go. When's the car coming? What car is it? What's it all about? Next thing I know, I'm off to China, and we're learning all about the brand. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey getting to where I am today. But yeah, absolutely loving this role. But sometimes do miss the buzz of buying and selling used cars, because that's always been a passion of mine.
I mean, it must be almost like a startup, being in the company that you're in at the minute, because of, you have, as you say, you've been established in the UK less than a year, really, haven't you?
Absolutely. I think the business was started 5 or 6 months, I think, before we all started effectively, and ultimately it was just the basic stuff. But yeah, it's a real startup, and it's got that vibe of a startup internally. I mean, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the want to succeed within the team is something I've very rarely experienced in the past. You get a sales team, for example, that are firing all cylinders. It's phenomenal, but it's a job to keep them there. But we've all got that sort of right attitude towards, we just want to do a good job. We're learning an awful lot. Obviously, we've got the likes of Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, LEVC in the UK, but we are really our own separate company. So all of the sort of support has come from China with that, and they've been absolutely fantastic getting us off the ground with everything we need. Obviously, the cars here, the launch event, the investment from China into the UK is phenomenal. I mean, one thing I learned really on with Geely is that they will do something like enter the UK as a market. I mean, if you can succeed in the UK, you can succeed anywhere in the world, but they've done this in other countries before, and I think ultimately the investment has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, our marketing spend, our launches, everything else, the amount of staff we've got. I mean, we've got 60 plus staff in the UK now, which is a similar size to MG, I believe. So we're really, really going to town on it, and a great mix of people, real different backgrounds. People that have been with, say, Volkswagen, BYD, a few BYD staff, as you know, Adam, and we've got a real sort of eclectic bunch of people who can pull from different backgrounds and different experiences, and it all sort of comes together nicely. So it's a great bunch, and it works. I think Michael Yang, our managing director, has recruited people not on obviously their ability and their past, but also their attitude, and that really shows through. I mean, the feedback we are getting from the dealers as a company is really good so far. The positivity is great. So yeah, it's a startup. It's new. Everything's building. Yeah, there's some hiccups down the road. There's some problems we overcome, but normally we can get through it quite quickly. And I think from my point of view, something that the dealers like, I hope they like, is the fact that I was one of them. So I understand what they go through, because I've been on that side of the fence, and I've had that experience of dealing with an OEM and the pinch points and the annoyances and the things that they sort of throw at you that you're like, you've never sold a car in your life, have you? So you tend to have that, and I think they appreciate people within the manufacturer industry who have worked for the network within the network, should I say? But yeah, no, it's great. It's really exciting times. Good bunch of people, great setup, and there's some big things to come from Geely. Some good products coming. We've got the Star A launch next month. That's going to be a great seller for us. Obviously, a PHEV that does some proper miles, and it's some other cool products coming as well. You've probably seen the orange thing that's been dropped recently. That's they've got some really good stuff, and obviously they're looking up at BYD with the volume, and the aspirations are there. So yeah, all good fun.
Harry, when I talk to dealers who have just taken on a Chinese car brand franchise for the first time, particularly the ones who have perhaps they've had Ford, Vauxhall, Volkswagen, one of the long running legacy brands, the thing that they always say, the most surprising element, is the speed and the enthusiasm that comes from working with a Chinese brand. It's just like they launch a car and then bam, it's there in the showroom, isn't it? And there doesn't seem to be a delay. You know, when the Chinese say they're going to do something, it kind of happens almost immediately. I mean, from you know, considering your background in the motor trade, I mean, have you been surprised by that as well?
Oh, massively. I mean, it just happened so quickly. You know, you know a new product is coming. For example, the Star A. We knew that it was going to be very quickly after the Geely EX5, should I say? And it's here. You know, they're in the country, they're ready to go, and the next one is imminent. You know, we started talking about the Star A straight after the launch of the EX5, and then we're going to talk about the next one straight after the launch of this one. It's so quick, and it's so quick, and they will make a decision very, very quickly and act on it very quickly and get it out very quickly. There's no sort of delay. There's no messing around, you know, with politics and endless meetings, etc. That I've experienced in the past. So yeah, it's such a breath of fresh air. To be fair, it's quite nice to have that speed to market, which I think is key in this ever moving market, because there's a lot of, as you said, Chinese brands at the minute, and they're all quick at doing things. And it's they don't hang around. As we look at BYD's growth up to their 50,000 units last year, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Can that speed sometimes be a bit of a disadvantage, because you haven't really got the time to actually establish the brand or tell customers about it? You know, you were just saying how your first day at work was March last year, and then you know then you're launching your first car towards the end of the year. You've got another one coming. You know, you haven't really had a lot of time to actually talk to customers and tell people about the brand. Or am I wrong?
No, I absolutely agree. It is a short space of time, and one of the most difficult things for a new entrant in the UK is building brand awareness. And we're extremely fortunate to have a really good marketing department headed up by Mark Blundell, who was at the beginning of BYD's journey as well. So, you know, if he can copy and repeat that for Geely, it's going to be fantastic. And you see some of the stuff we're doing marketing. I mean, as soon as you search Geely on Instagram or whatever, your algorithms are in there, and you're just getting served all the time with adverts. We've got out of home, we've got television, AdSmart, all that sort of good stuff. It's just about building awareness. I think the key thing for us in the UK, which you obviously will happily take advantage of and build on, is the Volvo, Polestar, Lotus connection. And that's on our culture wall in our showrooms. A customer goes in the showroom, they'll see those badges on the wall, and that really is quite a powerful tool to sort of get around that occasional negative perception of a new brand. What's this brand all about? Who's this brand? From a customer point of view, they don't know the brand, they don't know anything about it, they've seen it, they like the look of it, what's it all about? And a salesman also, a salesperson, says to a customer, you know, look at this. These are other companies within the Geely family. All of a sudden, the customer's like, oh, okay, I know that brand. I trust that brand. These brands are linked. Okay, I'm happy with that. And that's something we really sort of go to town on, as far as we're allowed to, put it that way. Culture wall in the showrooms has got all of the Geely brands around it. It's quite a powerful tool to try and build that momentum. But I know exactly what you mean about, you know, customer perception. You know, you speak to people today and they say, oh, I've heard of BYD. You speak to people now that haven't heard of Geely. Give it 12 months down the line, hopefully we'll be in a similar boat. But as I said, as soon as you explain to somebody that Geely is the parent company of, it all becomes clear. So it's just building that brand, and that's the big thing for us at the minute, is going heavy on marketing. And again, one thing I've learned from the Chinese is the investment is there. You know, they don't set out to fail with anything. So the investment is there when it comes to marketing and when it comes to, getting us out there in the UK. So it's a challenge, but it's good.
Obviously, for you guys, that's a big thing, and lots of, as in, you know, the ownership of Volvo and Lotus and so on. I could go on. That's a big part of your sort of secret sauce in a way for breaking through in the UK, isn't it? But there are a lot of Chinese brands at the moment, of course, aren't there? And I think one of the things that's being said is, you know, there will reach a point where some of those disappear because there's just not the space for every single Chinese brand in the UK. Some would argue there's not the space for all the European brands, and perhaps all the Chinese ones will succeed and some European ones will disappear. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think you're quite right, and I know you're right. That there's only so much of the pie to go around, effectively, and everybody wants a slice of it. And I think from Geely's point of view, the company worldwide is growing, and it's 39% growth year on year, just over 3 million units worldwide. So a big company, and we will effectively just keep on going until we get there. There is no failure option, I think, when it comes to the Chinese culture, and you set out to succeed, and that's it. And ultimately, I believe that I don't want to speak of the others as much, but you've got some big brands in there, like I said, BYD, Geely, obviously MG, etc., that have got the backing, and they've got sort of the fast start, if you were. But yeah, there will be some casualties along the line. You can see the decline in volume from some of the legacy brands last year. It's quite scary, some of the European brands, and you can really see, and so can the buying public. You just have to look around at cars, and you can see the price disparity between the legacy brands and the Chinese new entrants. And 10 years ago, I think even 5 years ago, the public perception of a Chinese car was like, I'm not going to buy a Chinese car. I don't want a Chinese car. They're not good. I don't know about them. My neighbours will laugh at me. I don't want a Chinese car. Where today, it's almost coming the other way around, in my view. I think a lot of customers, a lot of people will look at it and go, that's a really good car. It's a Chinese car, but it's 10 grand cheaper than something else. And actually, it looks really nice, and it's really good, and the quality is there. And I think that's sort of changing in the buyer's eyes, in the public's eyes, to come around to it. And the products nowadays the tech, the quality, the fit and finish, and the general feel is extremely good. I think that's the key. They've got, as we know, China is an absolute powerhouse at everything it does. And you look at any bit of tech in your house is made in China, and that's come now to cars. And it's growing. So yeah, there will be some casualties, and it's going to be an interesting year. I know last year you voted, I can't remember whether yourself, John, voted, was it car of the story of the year, wasn't it, or something like that in the Chinese car. It was the year of Chinese cars 2025. I think it's going to be 2026. I really do. But time will tell.
And then 2028 and so on, probably. Yeah.
Well, for me, I hope so, because I've got a mortgage to pay. But yeah.
I mean, it's given us
my bills,
so thank you. It's very helpful for us as well. I mean, of the people who've put their name down for Geely so far, or said they're interested, I'm sure you say it's lots of things about the car, and it's a fantastic product, but is price one of the the big driving factor? And I don't think that's a dirty word. I think we're in a cost of living crisis, and cars are very expensive. But is price a big part of it?
Price is a big part of it, admittedly, but a car's the second biggest purchase you make in your life. And you don't necessarily want the cheaper. I mean, nobody makes a bad car anymore. The old Lada jokes from years ago are all gone. Nobody makes a bad car. So price is key. But I think people want quality. They also want technology and spec nowadays, and that's definitely where we as a company, we do really well. I mean, the Geely X5 is the only car in its segment with massaging seats, for example, and the tech, like the speakers in the headrest for your telephone calls, etc. It's all really good stuff, and people like that. And I think that is definitely something that the Chinese do extremely well, is put a lot of kit as standard in their cars, and also keeping it simple. But yeah, I agree. Price is definitely a driver. There are some very good products that are out there. Cherry, for example, that have come out just under £30,000, and then you look at our Star Ray, that's exactly the same boat, and side by side, our spec is slightly better. So I'm hoping that car. Well, I'm not hoping. I know that car's going to do well for us. Everything's pointing in the right direction. So I'm working on the offering at the minute. A PCP offering with the team, and the idea is to make it as compelling, not necessarily, we don't want to go, this is the cheapest in the world, because you end up with a race to the bottom. But it's that perceived customer value piece. The customer has to look at that and go, that's great value. that's what I want to buy. Not necessarily the cheapest, but it has to be really good value. So it's a mixture of having, the cheapest car in the market, and actually people that want to buy that cheapest car, and some necessarily don't. They want something with some toys and some gadgets. But yeah, you can see where we price the Star A EMI when it comes out, and give you an idea that's where we want to be. We want to be in the mix. We've got a deep segment SUV coming soon, so that's going to be a bigger car, and the products will keep flowing. So price is definitely a factor, but don't think it's the be all and end all of the purchaser's decision.
One of the other things that I sort of feel like the Chinese entrants have pressed the reset button on is sales models, because we had agency sales coming in, starting to proliferate a little bit in bigger European manufacturers. And, even some Geely group brands, because like Volvo and Polestar, of course, have been dabbled with agency sales. I think they're still using it. You guys aren't doing that. And I think most other Chinese car makers aren't doing that. Just what's the sort of motivation from your side behind not going agency?
We don't sell cars to the public. We sell cars to dealers. Dealers are the best people positioned to sell cars to the public, in my opinion. I mean, I was at Volvo when it went to the agency flip, and the biggest thing we had at that time was the sort of the lack of control over what's going on with that deal, the lack of input. Often you'd have a customer, you're a sales executive selling a car, and you've got a customer rings up and says, can I change my mileage from 8 to 10,000 a year, please? And you go, yeah, of course. You tap away on the finance system, you change it, you get it reaccepted, job done, you move on with your day. With agency, you had to, okay, Mr. Customer, you have to ring up Volvo. We have to do this, you have to do that. And, we can do it, but it's going to take a couple of days. And then, for example, you had a bit of a daft one at the time that they would have to refund the customer their deposit, redo the entire deal, and then, for example, put it back through again. So it ended up being quite a disjointed affair. And I think ultimately, in my opinion, from somebody who's done it for years, is the dealers do it best. That's what they do. They deal with customers. They deal with everything. Let's just do the wholesale model. That's what we're in. Wholesale them a car, give them some margin, then they can do with that what they please. That's up to them. That's the my opinion. But obviously, it wasn't my decision that's the way we're going to go. That was always like that from the start. And I just think it seems to be the easiest, simplest route for a manufacturer to come into a market is give a network that knows what they're doing all of the sort of all of the tools to do the job. We've got the cars, we've got everything behind the scenes. They've got the rest of the tools to do their job. They've got the salespeople, the admin staff, the ability to register, all that sort of stuff. So just let them crack on with it. So I think it's an easier route to market is probably the reason why we've done it. But in my opinion, I think it's the best way to do it. I've never been a massive fan of agency at all. I don't think it's the right way to go. But.
Well, on the subject of dealers, Harry, I mean, do you want to give us sort of an update on where you are and your future plans for your network?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 36 dealers that are in soft launch phase, as we call it at the minute. We've got 50 plus on the books. I mean, we will have over 50 dealers supporting us for Star A launch next month. 36 dealers soft launch. So soft launch for us means they've got demonstrators on the ground registered. They've got at least one technician trained in the workshop. They've had their frontline staff, so either sales, service advisors, business managers, etc., through our own in-house Geely product and brand training, which is a one-day training course that we do every month. And that's over. We've done over 500 people through that so far, and you can see from the customer feedback that we get that staff are knowledgeable. They know about the car. They know about the staff are enthused. And I'm a massive believer, and I believe this is the right way to do it. Is you should train your sales staff. You should train everybody frontline to know all about the product they're selling, to know all about the car, to know all about the offers, to know absolutely everything. So when a customer walks into that showroom, they've got a sales executive who's been on the training. They know how this works. They know how that works. And it's often overlooked. training salespeople in this industry, I think is overlooked, because you've got a new starter into the business and you go, right, he just needs to sell some cars and chuck him in at the deep end. But we've said we will not let a dealer have demos and start trading until their frontline team have been through this sales training. And I stuck with that from day one. And that's working, because we are seeing some real good pockets of success and some great customer feedback when it comes to the experience in the showroom. Yes, the showroom's not got all the amazing, lovely CI done, the tiles, the furniture, and all the lovely stuff. But the customer walks in and they're speaking to a salesperson who knows about the car. They just can answer their questions. And often, as we all know, customers know a lot more about the car than the sales executive before they walk into the dealership. But we want that to be the other way around. So, it's been really good. So, 36 soft launch dealers at the minute, over 500 frontline staff trained, and more to come. So, Kevin Watkins is my training manager, and he's absolutely superb. And we're working with a really great provider to get our training done. So, I'm a massive believer in training. I think it is overlooked and under budgeted in a lot of businesses. But again, my opinion.
Yeah. So will all these dealers, will they just be separate sites? They won't be alongside other Geely brands. Are they going to be separate Geely showrooms with bespoke Geely branding?
Yeah. So all our showrooms at the minute is purely Geely. So that's how we're set out. The model, for example, obviously Zeekr, Lynk & Co, etc., potentially coming to the UK. I'm not 100% sure. They'll be separate standalone brands. So we're partnering with some dealer groups where we're going into other dealers, for example, sharing half of a Ford showroom or sharing half of a Volkswagen commercial showroom or something like that. But we haven't got the facility. We're not geared up to go, okay, here's Zeekr. Zeekr can go in next to it, or Lynk & Co can go next to it. It's purely Geely. Yeah. It is purely Geely.
I mean, could that potentially
Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, I mean, could that potentially? I know it's too early to say. I mean, you're still in soft launch phase, but I mean, could that potentially change in the future? Because of course, like Stellantis, for example, with Leap Motor, they're in. I went to a Leap Motor showroom the other day, and in the same showroom, in the same room, they're alongside Vauxhall and Peugeot. I mean, could Geelys be sold alongside Volvos, for example, or is the idea just to keep them separate for that brand recognition?
It's to keep it separate. I mean, when I first started, one of my first questions, I think it was even interview stage, was where will the showrooms be in Volvo dealers, I assume? And no, it's not. It's completely separate. Completely separate. I mean, we're not obviously Volvo Polestar. I get that, I understand that. But you've almost got the parent company in China, Geely Holdings. We're Geely Auto UK. Then you've got Volvo, and then you've got obviously Lotus, Polestar, etc. So the way the company operates is you've got the mothership, if you were, and then you've got the different brands coming off it. So yeah, I can't see us ever being in a Volvo showroom. It just wouldn't fit. But some of the other Geely brands, it might do. I mean, our showroom setup at the minute, we've either got a 6 or 8 car showroom, CI, depending on the size of the real estate that the dealer group has. We work with them, but there's no talk about why you're going to need this size showroom for this brand that's coming. At the minute, there's nothing. So I think it's going to be a completely separate entity if and when those other brands come to the UK.
Slightly tricky question before we move on to our stories. I mean, enormous uptick in sales for Chinese brands this year. BYD, one of them particularly. Yep. I think JQ and Chery, enormous as well. What are your sales ambitions for this year? Bear in mind, you've got the EX5. I mean, the Star Ray is coming along shortly, isn't it? No relation, by the way, the Star Ray.
It is.
Yeah.
We want to get to 1% market share as quickly as possible. We're at 0.02 tail end of last year. First couple of soft launch months, some really early starters with 478 units, which is a start. It's a starting point. The ambition for the UK is 20,000 units next year. And looking at the projection of Star Ray and EX5 I think we should be fine to get there. We just need the momentum. The current momentum that with our network development team is phenomenal. That will continue, absolutely no doubt with that. We need the sales side of it. The dealers are doing a really, really good job. The conversion rates in the showroom is fantastic. We just need that brand to naturally evolve and grow. And as you said at the beginning, growing a new brand in the UK is extremely difficult and extremely costly. But that is happening. And when that eventually does happen, we will see some real volume. So some big aspirations for this year and indeed next year and going forward. So we have a plan, we have ambition as a brand. And as I said, there is no option to do anything else other than plough on with that. And, as you know, China, extremely rich country in this area, wanting to penetrate this market and indeed Europe and indeed the world. So it's going to be good. So it's big ambitions.
Exciting times ahead for this year then. Well, Harry, thank you for joining us.
No problem at all.
And you can stick around while we go through our favourite stories of the week, and then you get to choose at the end who's the winner. So I suppose we'd better go on with that, haven't we, Batch?
Now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. John, have you ever wondered why I, along with 14,000 other dealers, choose to partner with Auto Trader?
Well, actually,
I didn't think so. I'll tell you anyway. With more than 84 million consumer visits every month, it connects us with more engaged car buyers and delivers more deals than anyone else in the UK. And now, with the launch of Buying Signals, we'll have brand new insights on every deal, showing how likely a customer is to buy the car they're interested in. Plus, as someone who set out to use AI and data as much as possible in my business, I've found their technology, data and tools genuinely invaluable. But when I do get stuck,
which is, let's face it, most of the time,
Auto Trader is always on hand and committed to supporting us to get the very best from our package. To find out how they can help you, visit trade.autotrader.co.uk.
Batch and I are going to run through our favourite stories of the week, and at the end, Harry gets to decide which one of us chose the best ones and who is the winner. I won last week, apparently. I don't remember doing that, but I had to check. So I'm going to start with news about EVs, which, of course, is my favourite subject after Chinese cars. And this is some news from the Treasury, well, sort of. As a report suggests, the Treasury is eyeing up the cost of EV charging because of concern around all the things that the Treasury is going to, or Rachel Reeves is going to do to claw back a bit of money on EVs, which includes the 3 pence per mile charge, which comes in something like 2028, I can't remember. And of course, there's been changes to things like London congestion charge, which affects anyone who's in London. And there was a sort of retrospective thing around tax. Lots of things to hit EV drivers that weren't there 5 years ago. But there's this report in the Daily Telegraph suggests that Whitehall officials are keen to reduce bills for both consumers and businesses. And the government is exploring ways of cutting what they call network charges at public charging points. I don't know if that's network charges in the price, just that's their term for using the charging network, or there is some specific, they're trying to drive down the cost that the network operator is charging. I don't know. But of course, there's lots of difficult things about charging, setting up a public charge point operator, I would imagine. One of which is, I don't think their electricity has any sort of price cap on, because, if you're running a business in the UK, you'll know that your electricity is far more than doing it in, charging your car at your own house. It's more expensive to charge it in your dealership than it is at home. So I imagine that's one of the issues. There's lots of things around the cost of the chargers themselves, of course, the cost of getting the planning applications in for all these chargers, lots of paperwork. It's all very complicated, isn't it? But so this is news that the government is looking to reduce that, thankfully. What they're not looking to do is reduce the VAT on it. That's the interesting thing here. So one of the suggestions that's often put forward is remove or reduce or align, whatever word you want to use, the VAT rate on public charging, which is 20%, with the VAT rate on home charging, which is 5%, because that's what your electricity VAT is. So I'm pleased something might be in motion. I think it's incredibly necessary. And I think it's only come about because I think they've had an overwhelming amount of correspondence to suggest that actually all the measures that they're putting in place, on top of the problems there are already with owning an EV in the UK, is just going to drive down demand.
Yes, well,
Over to you, Batch. What do you
yes,
think?
well, I did have this story down as well, annoyingly, but yeah, I mean, this subject of VAT, this yawning gap between VAT on home charging and on public charging. I mean, it's a drum that's been banged by lots and lots of people over the past year to 2 years. Most notably, the SMMT. Of course, they've been very adamant that this needs to be looked at and changed. I do think something does need to happen because the more people who buy electric cars, we are moving away from electric cars being the preserve of well-heeled people and people who can afford an electric car. We are very, very quickly moving into the mass market now, and I think it does need to be looked at. Which the other part of this story as well is there are rumours that the ZEV mandate is going to be looked at as well. I know a lot of manufacturers, unsurprisingly, it's the manufacturers who have been unable to meet that target last year and the year before who are calling most loudly for it to be looked at. On that subject, I do think the government will be pressurised to look at the ZEV mandate at some point. We hear that last year manufacturers didn't hit that required 28%, but as we know, there are loopholes and different ways around it. So you can't really take that as a given that the ZEV mandate is failing. But of course, it goes up to 33% this year, and again, 50. I think it's 50% the year after, or very close to that. So I do think something. I mean, what I will say is there is going to be a lot more talk around public VAT charging and the ZEV mandate this year. I think those are the two things which are going to be, we're going to be talking a lot about that this year. And I think the government is going to be under pressure to look at this stuff because at the moment, there's both carrots and sticks, aren't there? And the industry is calling for fewer sticks and more carrots.
It's almost like the government is kind of stuck between, I'll use the Rachel Reeves term, balancing the books. Is that a Rachel Reeves term? It's a general government term. Balancing the books.
Yes.
But they're stuck between that and clawing back tax revenue, which is coming down the road as EVs, well, as we transition into EVs, there's going to be a loss of fuel duty, etc. Hence that 3p thing. But at the same time, of course, the reason not to keep tweaking the ZEV mandate is net zero is also coming down the line. But there seems to be an element of creative accounting when it comes to net zero in terms of, well, if we say as a nation we're going to reduce our CO2 emissions by X, Y, Z, all the sort of derogations that are involved in the ZEV mandate, and if you reduce your fleet overall emissions by 90% against 2021 or whatever the year is, then that's fine. You don't need to sell lots of EVs. And it's just I'm now on the same page as you, Batch, where I just think probably the ZEV mandate is going to have a tweak. I didn't think it would because I just thought they'll reach a point where you can't push it any further before it hits the target for CO2 reductions as a whole country. But maybe there's something to be worked out there. I don't know. Harry, what do you make of this story?
Yes, it's an odd one, isn't it? And I do think you're quite right. There is some creative counting going on, but I think the one thing that strikes me and has always sort of made me think how and why, and that just was ill-conceived, is the whole pence per mile thing. How are they going to do that? How are they going to get the revenue from that? How is the question that was going through everybody's head at the time. And I just think it's not been thought through properly, some of this, and there is loopholes and ways around it, and actually the whole bigger picture probably isn't. It just doesn't make sense. I don't think it builds trust in the government, and we're trying as a country to cut down our emissions, grow EVs, and then they put things like government grant in that is uber complicated and difficult for dealers, and they launched it and custom to the public with no dealers signed up, and it took time. It didn't work. A lot of it doesn't work, in my opinion. I just think they just need to. I think Rachel Reeves needs to rethink some of this strategy, and and make it work for the public and the industry.
What do you think, Harry, about?
I quite agree.
Harry, what do you think about this idea that the ZEV mandate will have to be looked at, watered down, potentially even changed dramatically so the UK falls more in line with the EU? Or do you think it's just a case of, look, those are the rules in place, it's mandated, it's all set in stone, manufacturers have just got to get on with it, and in time, the consumer demand will follow suit?
I think it's a bit of a difficult one again, because you're right, consumer demand will follow suit. But if you've got manufacturers that are forced to do certain things and not sell certain cars to meet these targets, it all just becomes extremely costly. And, you end up with scenarios where you've got, for example, a ton of pre-registered EVs kicking around that isn't making anybody any money, and they're done for a reason, just to hit a target where people don't necessarily want them. So I generally think it needs to be watered down to that European level and just make a bit of sense. I think the government needs to listen to the industry a bit more. I don't know the ins and outs of how they get their information, but I just think some of them need to, there needs to be a bit of a mechanism where us as an industry can feed back to the government, say, this is what we think, we're experts on this, at a bit more of a local level. It's one of those things that just have to roll with it, unfortunately, at times, don't we? There's not much we can do. But yeah, I don't agree with a lot of it, I must admit.
Well, it's a nice time to be in a car operation that currently only sells EVs, I must say.
Wow.
Not for much longer, but yeah. No, exactly. We've got EVs, we've got PHEV. Yeah, it's a good time for that. But
just very quick. Sorry, just very quickly, Harry. On that point, I mean, do you think these constant sort of rumours and calls for the mandate to be watered down, push further back, kick the can further down the road? I mean, really, it probably does help the Chinese car makers, this, doesn't it? Because it's as we spoke about earlier on, the Chinese are very, very good at, if the market changes, they've got a car for that market. They're able to launch a car very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas, the European car makers, I mean, they haven't quite got to the stage where engine production has been switched off. But we are getting to that stage where European car makers are having to make really, decisive decisions on what future technology do they invest in. I mean, with this constant wrangling of what's going to happen, I mean, surely this is going to help the Chinese, isn't it? Establish more market share.
You're quite right. I think it does fall nicely into the hands of the Chinese manufacturers, because they are very quick at bringing a vehicle to market, and that it could benefit. But I think the chopping and the changing and the lobbying of people to sort of water it down, as you said, and the targets changing, it does add pressure to the legacy OEMs. I mean, likes of various brands, Ford, Stellantis, the targets are unsustainable. You've got the government was saying, they're going to allow flexibilities. Just need to make their mind up and put something put something down that works for everybody. 15 grand a unit, fine if you don't do this, and these threats. You think, God, let's just sort it out. Let's just sort it out and make sure that it works for the UK car industry, because there's a lot of people employed by the UK car industry. It's not just the OEMs who are making money off this; it's everybody involved. There's a lot going on around that, and if these don't work, then employees in the UK don't earn any money, don't get paid, and it affects the whole economy. So let's just get it sorted out. Just put something sensible in stone. Don't change it. That's it. Move on. But
I think we should just wheel you down Downing Street and get you in there to have a conversation. Now we've fixed all that, I think we can move on to our next story. James Batchelor, off you go.
Well, on the subject of brands, Jeep. Just want to talk a little bit about Jeep and Stellantis. I mean, we mentioned.
Oh, I'm glad somebody wants to talk about Jeep.
well, I shall come on to that. You've hit the nail on the head there, John. Our esteemed colleague Cameron Richards this week has been at the Brussels Motor Show, which in itself, I think the Brussels Motor Show could very well be the next Geneva Motor Show if the wind carries on blowing. I mean, a lot of new cars have been launched there this week, and of course it's the first big show of the year, obviously, so early on in the year. But anyway, Jeep were there. A lot of other brands were there as well, and our colleague Cameron sat down with the boss of Jeep Europe, and Cameron kindly asked a question which I had, which is, what is the future of the Jeep brand in Europe? And of course, because the man in question, Fabio Catone, said, obviously because he's the boss of Jeep Europe, he gave a very positive answer about the future of Jeep in Europe, as you'd expect. But it does kind of beg the question, because there have been a lot of rumours that following the departure of Carlos Tavares in December 2024, that this car company, Stellantis, constellation of brands, as it's so called, of 14 very well-known car brands around the world. What is the future of this car maker? It's quite amazing. There are even rumors about this, really, because it was only founded in 2021. But a lot can change in 4 or 5 years. We've the particularly with the Chinese now arriving, the old order doesn't necessarily work in the future. And the answer from Fabio was there is a strong future of Jeep under Stellantis. But you do kind of wonder which, will Stellantis be broken up in the next few years? And if it is, who are going to be buying those brands? Are the Chinese going to be buying some of these brands? We don't really know. Or indeed if Stellantis will be broken up. But it is an interesting question, isn't it? Just because a brand has got a long history, Jeep, everybody knows a Jeep. If you think of a 4x4, you probably think of Jeep along with a couple of other car makers as well. But just because it's well known doesn't necessarily mean that the future is bright and rosy for that brand.
I always find Jeep and I find Stellantis a curious one altogether when it comes to, if we put our motoring journalist brains on, if you were to lay out all the Stellantis products, I find there's a quite strange and obvious line down the middle of them a lot of the time, where you can tell where stuff has been developed in Europe and stuff has been developed in America. So it's a strange situation where Jeep is a prime example, actually. The smaller Jeeps are all based on European stuff. So you get in one and it's, I'm in a Peugeot. Great. It's quite obviously got all the same stalks, and it even feels like a sort of French car to drive in a way. The clutch is really high and it's all a bit, and the brakes are really bitey and all that sort of stuff. And it sort of rolls a bit like a Peugeot 2008 does. And then you move further up the chain and you get in a Wrangler or something like that. And it's just completely different infotainment, completely different key, completely different way that it drives, different engine. It's a bit weird. And I always feel a bit uneasy with that Jeep kind of straddles this strange worldwide line of development. But I've kind of thought for a little while maybe Stellantis just needs to go and split back into two again. It's a very uneasy partnership to say that Dodge and Chrysler and Jeep sit alongside Peugeot, Citroën, Vauxhall, whatever. I just don't think there's a point where you can share manufacturing and you can share development costs for things, but they just don't go together. There's never going to be a point where a Vauxhall is suitable for the same platform as a Dodge. It just doesn't work. It just seemed like a weird, uneasy partnership.
Well, yeah, I know.
The bigger problem, of course, is the sheer number of brands they've got. That's the bigger, and it's probably not even, I don't think it's technically a problem that you've got Dodge and Fiat, Dodge and Fiat and Vauxhall all in the same, in the same organisation, because they don't really compete with each other. Yeah. But it's your DS and Alfa Romeo and Peugeot, Citroën, like all these European brands are just so tightly compacted, and I think they've tried to, I'm not saying anything new here, people know this already, but they've tried to separate them a bit, but it's, Citroën feels a bit lost at the moment, I feel, and I think that's reflected in the sales volumes in the UK. They didn't have a good year last year. Peugeot did quite well. Peugeot's this sort of premium brand that's not a premium brand. DS is the premium brand. Alfa Romeo is another premium brand. It's all,
I know,
it's all very confusing.
It is. And I know I've said this before, but I think Stellantis is in danger of becoming, or at least looking like a British Leyland, where you've just got too many brands that have all got lovely legacies. Let's face it, separately, they've got lovely histories, but do they seriously all sit alongside each other? And are there enough customers who are going to be buying enough of these cars? There are big questions around Stellantis. When are we finally going to realise that as much as we love Alfa Romeos, they don't sell particularly well in the UK? Even in wider Europe, they don't sell particularly well. And, when will Maserati finally be put under the control of Ferrari again? Will it be sold off? And when will Stellantis finally realise that DS has been a very, very costly folly? It just cannot. It's just not a feasible project. But I mean, Harry, I just would be interested to get your take on just not Stellantis per se, but just brands in general, really, because your motor trade history has been working with some of the biggest brands with the longest histories and legacies. I mean, do you think brands are still going to be important moving forwards, or UK consumers more willing to accept new brands that are coming along, such as Geely?
No, absolutely. I do think, from what John said earlier, you've got Jeep, for example. Everybody knows Jeep. Everybody knows what it's all about. It's been around for donkey's years. Do they sell well? Not really, but people still know the brand. And it's a weird thing. You know a brand, you know of a brand. I mean, I know, all those brands that Stellantis own, they've been around for donkey's years, apart from Leap Motor, which is obviously Chinese. Then you've got the new Chinese cars that will sort of come in and go, well, actually, I'm cheaper, I'm better quality, I've got more tech. So all of a sudden, from customers' point of view, that, I know Jeep, I know Peugeot, I know whatever that legacy brand is, but I'm not that bothered. I'll just, because this is cheaper and better and. So I think brand is important. It has to be known, but if the brand has lost its way with the product, or it hasn't got a product that people want to buy, then it's irrelevant anyway, isn't it? You know the brand, but if the product isn't what the consumer wants to buy, they just won't buy it. It's as simple as that. You won't buy an inferior product just because it's got a brand that you know. If Apple all of a sudden came out with a new iPhone and it was absolutely horrendous, people would buy it for a bit, but then assume they would realise that eventually, well, I can buy this one because it's better, and the brand sort of loses momentum a little bit. But yeah, Stellantis is a weird. I've always thought it's a bit weird how they've got likes of Vauxhall and Maserati and everything. Like John said a minute ago, some of it just doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And I think when you had Citroën, Peugeot together, people like that, DS, obviously that makes a bit of sense. But then you start lobbing American brands in there and Italian brands in there, and Italian brand, it's just all a bit weird. But yeah, I think the brand is important. It has to be known, but more importantly, the brand has to make a product that people want to buy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on.
It's interesting.
Sorry, John. I think you're absolutely spot on, Harry. And using your smartphone analogy there, I mean, the famous thing, isn't it, with Nokia and BlackBerry particularly? But Nokia, was the number one player, wasn't it? And it was assumed that brand alone would see it and reap future success. And then, of course, Apple comes along, a product that was revolutionary and people wanted to buy. And then now look where Nokia and particularly BlackBerry no longer exists. So I think you're absolutely spot on. Just because it's a well-known brand doesn't guarantee future success, does it?
No, it doesn't. And other brands will come in like us, like obviously Geely, and bring some decent products, decent price. People will all of a sudden have their heads turned with some of these Chinese OEMs. I hope they all come to Geely, obviously.
I mean, just to chat, that would have been a nice ending, but just to tack on that, I was going to ask, do you think there's a degree of complacency amongst European manufacturers?
Yes, massively so. Massively so. It's extremely visible with some of the sort of activities they get up to and the pricing that they put out there in the market. And you just look at it and think, from my point of view, obviously knowing the ins and outs of my Chinese OEM and working with some of these legacy brands in the past, you sort of think to yourself, if you guys don't react to what's going on in the market, it's going to fail. I mean, you just look at the SMMT numbers from last year, the percentage drop. I can't remember any of them, to be fair, let alone all of them. they must be sitting up in their boardrooms and going, we need to do something about this, guys. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And it's evident. I mean, I'm sure they are. They're very, very intelligent people and very big, huge organisations, but it's not become evident, I don't think, in the real world yet. So it's going to be an interesting year, interesting times for our industry. That is for sure.
Yeah, certainly. We're slightly running out of time, but I'm going to try and squeeze in. Should we try and squeeze in two more? I don't really want to talk about. Do you know what? I'm going to talk about Chinese EVs.
Oh God, John, can we change the subject, please?
No, carry on. That's what I want to talk about. Specifically, Geely ones, please.
Well, this is an EU. It's all right, Batch. You can talk about the cheeky girls. We'll leave that to you. But we'll come on to that. The European Union is what I'm going to talk about now, as everyone switches off. And they've set out a framework, exciting word there, very European Union kind of word, for Chinese EVs to avoid punitive tariffs. Because, of course, in Europe, as we've talked about before, Chinese EV makers are penalised for bringing Chinese-made cars into the UK, not the UK, into the EU, based on various different factors, but they've all had varying different. Am I right in thinking Batch, or am I thinking of America? They've had varying different percentage duties put on top of them.
I think the highest.
So MG, for example,
I think the highest is like 32.5% for brands like SAIC and things. I could be speaking out of turn there, but I think it has been a variable scale, but that's the highest, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. And I think it is MG who's been suffering from that. Although, strangely, when you go on the MG website in, say, Germany, it still looks quite affordable compared to a VW or something. So it's not really worked. Anyway, China doesn't really like this for quite obvious reasons. But what they've been lobbying for is a sort of a different way of looking at it. And the way forward seems to be this basic price situation. I say basic, actually it's very complicated, but the idea is, rather than a percentage tariff on cars, they will say a car coming from China cannot be any cheaper than this for this particular derivative and this particular battery size, and all this sounds very, very complicated. I couldn't quite get my head around how this is a better solution from the EU's point of view than what they had before. But I thought it was interesting that in some ways, maybe the tide is turning for Chinese cars in Europe a little bit, because we talk about here, should Chinese-made cars have any form of tariff on them here, because, of course, naturally they can undercut for multiple reasons. Let's say a British-made EV, just because we're not quite there yet, are we, in terms of making EVs cheaply, and China is. What did you make of this story, Batch?
Well, I mean, I had this down as well. I mean, the thing that is worth mentioning is the European Union's having a lot of wranglings with China, because the Chinese are pushing for this one kind of price point, the minimum price point. But also, the Chinese don't want their investments in Europe, which, a lot of Chinese car makers are investing heavily in Europe, whether that's car making or even in some cases sourcing components, but to a slightly less extent. They want their investments protected. So, they're thinking of the broader picture here. I mean, overall, I just feel that this whole story, it keeps coming around occasionally. The European Union is thinking of tariffs and tariffs that and tariff. I just feel as though, much like the UK, it's almost like politicians are the same, no matter which country you're in. I just feel as though Europe in general has been very slow to react to the Chinese coming here. We've known that this is going to be happening for quite some time, and it just feels as though there's a lot of running around and making tweaks at the edges. And who does this ultimately affect? I mean, does it help the customer? Yes or no? And I don't really know the answer to that.
I don't think it. I'll come to Harry in a second, but amusingly, part of the lobbying for this has been by Volkswagen, because they make the Cupra Tabascan electric car in China, and that comes over and has, in Europe, a tariff placed on top of it. So some of it is coming, it's like the call is coming from within the building. in terms of how this is. But it just seems so complicated. China's been pushing for minimum prices that centered around a single broadly applicable price, says this story, but the guidance from the EU requires model and configuration specific pricing based on the final sale price, the first independent customer within the EU. So in other words, they're going to set a minimum price based on all the things I talked about, and then say you can't discount this car. How is that going to work? Because surely you would just, I don't know about pre-registration in other countries, but I'm assuming you would just pre-register it, wouldn't you? And then, we've sold it to the first independent. Well,
but
it's I suppose the independent customer. It's just I can see.
Well,
Harry putting his head in his hands.
Before I hand over to Harry, I just on that point of European car brands and car makers in general, they need these decisions. Political decisions need to be made, well in advance and properly thought out. Because car manufacturers, look at BMW for example, they've been making the Mini Electric in China. They've been trying to bring it over to the UK. They've been developing the Oxford site for the last few years, and all of a sudden they've had to put a temporary halt on that and shelve those plans to actually start building that car in the UK, because there is so many political machinations and wrangling. Manufacturers don't know which way political governments and governments in general are going to be blowing. They say one thing 1 minute and then it's changed the next week. So this does have huge implications to everybody. It's just like, just make your mind up and stick to something.
Harry, go on. We've made you sit there in silence for long enough.
No, that's fine. I absolutely agree. I think whoever came up with this obviously must have been speaking to Rachel Reeves about the whole pence per mile thing, because it just doesn't compute. It doesn't make why make it so complicated? Just impose a tariff on the import cost of the vehicle, and that's it. Job done. Why do they have to make it so? How much it's sold for and all this? It just doesn't make sense. And ultimately, it's the customer that will suffer, because you'll have, a Chinese made or wherever made electric vehicle that can come into a country at a very competitive price. But that country or Europe decides to impose these tariffs on it, so therefore it's not as competitive. I understand there's reasons behind it, and I get all that, but why make it so complicated? In my opinion, why does it have to be so complicated? Just make it easy, make it simple, and sort of get it done, and make a decision. Why does it have to be so complicated and they can't make a decision on it? If you're looking at some of the stats about why they should, obviously you've got brands that have argued about it. Don't swap tariffs for minimum prices on Chinese vehicles. There's so much noise around it that the average buying customer, they just get confused with it all, don't they? And it just becomes irritating for everybody involved. But yeah, again, I don't know where the UK are going to stand with this sort of thing going forward. At the minute, we're quite happy here. It works for us. It is what it is. Obviously, we're in Europe as well, so that works for us as well. Obviously, you've got Zika and then Geely in Poland and various other places. It's not stopping us as a brand covering Europe as a market. Just makes it more confusing.
Well, it's nice to see that other governments are in disarray as well as ours. Over to James Batchelor, if you can squeeze one in before we run out of time.
Squeeze this one in. I'm not going to talk about the cheeky girls. For anybody listening, if they're interested in hearing why we're talking about the cheeky girls, then please do head over to our website. I'm not going to talk about that because I feel as though the story that I do want to talk about is of more relevance and interest to our car dealer listeners. So very briefly, we heard this week that fraudsters are targeting car buyers who are shopping on Kazoo by offering them discounts that real dealers never could. So this came from a report on BBC's Morning Live, which even our glorious leader James Baggott made an appearance on as a talking head. But this is quite a surprising development. This is something I haven't heard about. Sounds like it's a new type of scam. So criminals are intercepting seller emails to find out which cars they've inquired about, and upon learning which cars customers have been inquiring about, they've then been contacting the buyers, posing as the dealers, and then offering them significant discounts and often asking for a £400 deposit to secure the car. Obviously, we've spoken to Kazoo about this, and they've been in touch with all of their dealer partners, encouraging them to change their passwords, and they've issued some guidance to consumers as well. Yeah, it's a type of scam I haven't heard about, but really, it does. Overall, it just makes me feel as though, a lot of consumers, are, and we've all fallen into this trap before, not necessarily with cars, but with anything. If you are offered a deal that does seem to be too good to be true, the temptation is to act upon it and grab that deal, because it may disappear very shortly. Of course, the advice is, if something does seem to be too good to be true, pick up the good old fashioned telephone and actually call the dealer and talk to them about it, But these kinds of scams. I mean, it's yet another scam, isn't it? And we're probably going to be hearing more and more about these kinds of things. But yeah, slightly alarming thing to read this week.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, as far as we're aware, or as far as this Morning Live thing is concerned, it seems to be, well, I don't want to say it's isolated to Kazoo. I'm sure it happens across lots of other marketplaces, whether it's cars or anything else. eBay, for example, would be prime for this, wouldn't it? If you were buying something and you were trying to negotiate, or Vinted or whatever. But yeah, it's a difficult situation for them, because you have to do that very awkward thing of emailing to say, this is happening. Please don't fall victim to this stuff. But I can absolutely imagine how it would, because dealer communications like that you tend to do things over email or a bit of phone or stuff like that, don't you? And you could quite easily pretend to, if you're buying something on Amazon, you go on there, you buy it, it's done, or whatever. It's one of those sort of, if you're buying a used car, you do communicate in a bit more of an informal way a lot of the time. So I suppose it is ripe for someone getting in between you and the dealer and doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, you're spot on. You are spot on there, and this is why this scam has been quite kind of clever, because the hackers have been able to hack into the email conversations between all the communication between the dealer and the customer. And of course, in a lot of these cases, it does sound as though the customer may have offered a price, the dealer has rejected that price, and then of course the hacker then steps in and then contacts the customer, and of course the customer thinks that that's the dealer perhaps finally accepting their offer. So that's why it's kind of quite clever. But this is the problem with online car sales, isn't it? There is a level of kind of trust perhaps that can be a little bit misplaced at times.
Shall I quote our dear leader here with his consumer advice?
Should really.
He says, I would never hand over well, it's in the story. I would never hand over money for a car I hadn't seen to people that I hadn't met before. Yeah. So there we go. Yeah. Even though I'm sure some of his customers do put their trust in James, but he is a popular YouTuber now. So there you go.
Content creator.
It's like we all know him. So we do. Lovely. Well, Harry, I won't come to you for comment on that, because we're slightly running out of time. But are there any stories you think we should have covered this week, but we haven't?
No. From my point of view, no. I think we're all good.
Brilliant. So I'm going to have to ask you, what was your favourite story, or who chose the best stories?
I'm going to go with the hacking one for two reasons. Just to keep it 1-1. Keep it fair. I'm sitting on the fence with this particular one. No, I haven't read that one, to be honest. I haven't seen it anywhere, and it amazes me. Actually, it doesn't really amaze me, because they get everywhere, don't they? These hackers, these scams, they'll try anything to get money out of people. And I think what your leader said is absolutely quite right. You wouldn't hand over money to somebody you didn't know for a car you hadn't seen. I mean, you've got the likes of Kazoo and Cinch, etc., that obviously make a business out of it. Although Cinch, lost a lot of money last year, as we know, and you've got people that do that, but that's fine. But it really is open to scam and interpretation from these hackers that are extremely clever nowadays. That's the scary thing. They're so clever. They make it look so real. And if you can hack into an email communication between a dealer and a customer, and the customer is absolutely none the wiser, it's a dangerous place to be, isn't it? When you're handing over money, You know, I'm a believer that, you know, personally, I would never buy a car like that. I'd always want to go and eyeball somebody and shake their hand and have a deal with them and, you know, make sure it's all proper. But yeah, it's scary times that we live in. That's for sure.
Indeed. So scary that James Batchelor has won. I mean,
Rude.
I'm going to have a little lie down now. Well,
But it's 1-1, isn't it? Well, that right. It is 1-1 now.
Well, yeah, pretty much for the year, actually.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, all that's left for me to say is thank you, Harry, for coming on and talking to us today. And
my pleasure.
Give us a bit of your background and a bit more info about Geely. It's been great to have you on.
No problem at all. Thank you.
And thank you as well to Batch for joining us from his parents' upstairs spare bedroom. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. So make sure you're subscribed so you can be notified when that goes live. If you want to check out the stories mentioned today, take a look in the show notes below or head to cardealermagazine.co.uk. Thanks for listening and goodbye.